The People Make the Places, a pilot episode by Mike May and friends. I've always found when people have asked me the question, what is your favorite place to go in the world? It's all about the people that I meet in different places. And this could be anywhere from a good friend in Switzerland to a cab driver in Dublin. These are the people that really define the experience that I have when I'm traveling. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of people. So I wanted to put together a podcast that focused on travel, but it is the people I met that define the experience and my memories of that place. Here's a bit about me, which will inform the stories, the people, and the places that we talk about in this podcast. I was blind at age 3 from a chemical explosion, and I had a cornea and stem cell transplant in 2000, which gave me some low vision. This led to a best-selling book in 2007 by Robert Kurson called Crashing Through. I've done a lot of skiing worldwide. I have the dubious distinction of the fastest totally blind person at 65 miles an hour, which I set in Les Arcs, France. I came from a family of 6 kids. I've been married twice. My wife, Gina, is totally blind and travels with me a lot. My mother, OJ, was a huge influence on my life, and you can hear more about her in Crashing Through. And also, I have some interviews from Robert Kurson with her that I might share. I had 2 sons, Wyndham and Carson, who was killed in an avalanche in 2016. I've had 7 seeing eye dogs so far. I am a cancer survivor. I've worked for mainstream companies and startup companies in the beginning of my career, and then accessible technology since the 90s, including my own company, Sendero Group, focusing on accessible navigation. I now consult for the American Printing House for the Blind and a couple of other small companies. I'm currently based in Reno, Nevada. I'm from Northern California, specifically Davis. I've lived in Ashland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Wichita, Kansas, Washington, D.C., New Mexico, where I had my accident, and was born in Denver. There will be 4 threads that make up each podcast. One will be drawn from the audio archives going back to the 70s of different travels I'd had and different people I've met and some actualities, and I'll play a few samples of those in a minute. There are also 240 stories that I journaled over the course of many years, from 1997 to 2018, that were part of different Sendero trips, including our Way Fun trips to Europe and various places around the United States. I will convert those text stories into audio and play those. I'd like to have an interview with somebody traveling either to one of the places I've previously been or to a new place. I also want to dig into some tips and tricks for traveling. There's lots of apps and a lot of tools and technology, and of course that's been my career, accessible navigation, since the mid-90s, and we want to talk about some of those tools and alternative techniques that we use for independently traveling. A big part of my life has been skiing. One of my first international trips was to Switzerland in 1982 for what was then called the World Winter Games for the Disabled. I went with my friend and guide, Ron Salviolo, and we managed to win 3 gold medals, largely because my guide was in front of me and all of the other guide skier pairs had the guide behind. First off, you'll hear Ron guiding me from in front down Mount Yaharina in Sarajevo, calling out directions.
Right, go, 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 turn left, go, easy right, go, easy left, go, number 1.
Départ de Hiroru Sato, 283, Japon.
Mike May, USA, 3 Minuten Eine Sekunde, 46 Hundertstel. Time for number 5, Mike May, USA, 2 minutes, 01.46.
There's a much longer story about the evolution of the Winter Games to the Paralympics in the 80s, from Switzerland to Austria to Sarajevo to Calgary, and I'll tell that in another episode. There's a great story about how we got my seeing-eye dog, Ricky, into a hotel in Zagreb on our way to the Olympics. My first ever international trip was to Ghana in 1976, and there's a lot more to tell about that, but here's a brief snippet from the jungles in Ghana.
Really hot out here. I just ate it in my second gutter. I told you about these trenches they have around here about a couple feet deep. Well, I just fell in one. So a car came roaring by. They don't give pedestrians the right of way. Right here, they just beep their horn and just keep on roaring. You better get the heck out of the way or you've had it.
From West Africa to Scotland, there were 5 Sendero Group Wayfund trips. One was to Ireland and Scotland.
A group of intrepid visually impaired people have just undertaken a holiday from the United States, which they didn't have to play winning lines to join, using GPS as their tour guide. They visited Ireland and Scotland for a week. Tourists, by their very nature, are notoriously an impulsive lot, so we decided to send our reporter Manny Jasmy to see if he could keep up with them when they hit Edinburgh.
Over this way. As in this way.
A company of canes tapping their way around Edinburgh, from the brand new Scottish Parliament building to the city's medieval castle. A 20-strong party of American tourists, the vast majority of them visually impaired, sightseeing with the aid of global positioning satellites.
From Scotland to Argentina, one of the more unique experiences I ever had, and this is before 9/11, flying from Buenos Aires to Iguazu Falls. They didn't want my seeing-eye dog Utah to be with the other passengers, so they had me sit with the pilots in the cockpit. They invited my girlfriend to come up and sit in my lap in the jump seat, and we got to observe Iguazu Falls circling in from the front of a 727.
We're now descending at about 10,000 feet?
Nope, we're at 3,000.
3,000 feet. And coming in for a landing. We're in the front of a 727 flying from Buenos Aires to Iguazu with our pilots Daniel, Jorge, and Rolf.
We're above the Iguazu River. We're getting lower to the trees. Our altitude is 1,300 feet. We're now approaching the runway. It's on a plateau, a red clay plateau with grass. Well, now we're at 0. We're landing now.
Now we're right up against one of the falls here on the Brazilian side. The wind's blowing, caused by the water crashing down, and the mist is coming all around.
From Argentina to Spain.
Well, it's March 31st, 1988. We're standing out here on the medium in Barcelona, Spain. The sun is just trying to peek through, but it's still a little overcast. The breeze coming from behind my back. I'm facing the water in the port. And of course, there in the middle, there's all these birds are chirping away.
From Barcelona to Christchurch, New Zealand, I have a story to tell another time about sharing my birthday with Stevie Wonder. I've been blessed to become close friends with him, and I've traveled to a number of places. We were both very close to our mothers, and he came to my mother's memorial and shared some thoughts.
And as I was listening to the many things said about OJ, I thought about Lula May, because my mother was out of control.
Now to one of the journal stories that we will be drawing on in other episodes that really inspired this idea of people defining the places that I visited. The People Make the Places by Mike May. Tuesday, January 6th, 1998. Amazing how much can happen in a short amount of time. My dad died Wednesday, and Thursday morning I was on a flight to Europe after almost canceling the trip. All that time flying with lots of thoughts. But I don't think I've come to grips with my father's death yet. I have felt a strong pull and appreciation for family and friends and a deep gratitude for being so alive. When I am asked which are my favorite places, I always say it is the people who define the places, not the places themselves. There are interesting people everywhere. As we wind our way through the streets of London to Heathrow Airport, I thought I would comment on the people I have met so far to give you a flavor of those people who define these places. My seeing eye dog Josh isn't with me, so I do not have him as an icebreaker. Pete was my driver from Davis to SF. I heard him singing under his breath, and he had a great voice, so we talked to music. He was genuinely nice when I discovered at the SF airport that I had left my passport in Davis. My wife, Jennifer, was understanding, left work, and drove it down to me. The flight to Munich was half full, so one flight attendant was particularly attentive to me. She has recently moved to Israel, but has lived in Hungary, Germany, and Croatia. We exchanged email addresses after having some good conversations over the course of the 11-hour flight. The gal who met me at the Munich airport with a wheelchair was a bit taken aback when I burst out laughing at the notion of her pushing me through the airport in a chair. It drives me nuts that they automatically provide special services at European airports, and there is no way to shake these folks. They insisted on a special bus for me at the gate to go to the plane. They had already arranged it, and the young lady who was my driver sounded so disappointed that I couldn't turn her down. I ran out of patience when the flight attendant on the leg to Geneva carried on about opening the plastic with my cutlery when I didn't even want lunch. When she told me to wait until the other passengers got off before leaving the plane in Geneva, I said fat chance. I was met by another special services car at the plane side in Geneva. Estelle had such a nice French accent that I was softened and allowed myself to be escorted yet one more time. I wish they would just let me fly in first class and forget all this coddling. I breathed a sigh of relief when Fiona met me in the airport. Her parents joined us for lunch. Douglas is a quasi-Nobel Prize physicist. He carried on about mad cow disease. Good thing I wasn't having British beef for lunch. Irma has a wonderful Scottish accent despite living in Geneva for 45 years. This is a lady who told me years ago when I was deciding about ending a relationship with her daughter, Michael, it is possible to stay in love with more than one person. The weekend in the mountains outside Geneva with Fiona and her husband Cass was good for the soul. They cooked wonderful meals and served special wines and liquors there in a cozy traditional log chalet. We stacked firewood one day and hiked the next. It was a 5-hour hike round trip. We trudged to the top of the mountain for brunch in a restaurant with a 360-degree view of 200 miles. Lake Geneva and Neuchâtel gleamed below, and Mont Blanc and the Matterhorn bounded the distance. There were wildflowers I had never heard of. The weather was incredible for the end of October. I look forward to sharing the people I met on my trip with my friends and family at home, the ones who define the place called home. There's a sampling of the people and places that are part of my history, and I have a lot more where that came from. If you made it this far, then I'm guessing you're interested, so do give me some feedback. I'd love to interview people about different trips. The Flight for Sight group that I'm part of had a family go to Japan, and I want to hear about that. And then, of course, all the tools and techniques I want to add commentary here. Traveling as a blind person is super complicated, and so it's understandable why some people would not even want to deal with it. You think about it from the start to finish, doing research on the internet, booking reservations on apps for hotels or airlines. You have to get to know the particular apps. You can use services like IRA to help you with that, or a sighted friend or family member, but it's complicated. And then that's just getting started, then getting to the airport, and Uber, and through the airport, and through TSA, and then onto the airplane, and out the other end, and to your hotel and your destination. It is complicated, which is also true for sighted people, just more so if you can't see. One of the things you have to learn as a blind person is how to find workarounds, and travel often requires workarounds, so it's a good skill to develop whether you're blind or sighted. I like to think it's exciting and it's a fun puzzle to solve, but that's part of why I want to have this podcast, is to share some tips and tricks for how to do that and to hear from other people about their tips and tricks. I also want to talk about serendipity and to hear about your stories of serendipity. It's amazing to me about the people I've run into on the streets of Bethesda, Maryland, or in London, who if 5 minutes had elapsed one way or the other, I wouldn't have run into on the street. These are just random friends that happen to be in the same place at the same time. One of my favorite stories is about meeting Sarah Beck, a musician playing at the Bluebird in Nashville, Tennessee in 2007. And one thing led to another, and she got to play with Stevie Wonder, and we're lifelong friends with her and her family now. So many stories like that of people I've run into around the world, and if I hadn't been traveling, I wouldn't have run into them. It's amazing about the whole idea of 6 degrees of separation. In the future, we might also travel to Huayna Picchu and Machu Picchu in Peru, to Chile. The Sweetmans went with us to Ireland, a walking trip. I went on 6 trips, international trips, with my mother, OJ, and those are very precious and were pretty interesting. Gina Harper, my wife, is known as the Blind Woman of Action, and she's very popular on TikTok and Instagram, and maybe I can talk her into sharing one of her more popular stories with us. We're going to have a blind travel summit on November 13th in San Francisco. The Lighthouse for the Blind will share registration details about that sometime in the near future. Email any feedback you have to thepeople@mikemay.org. My website is crashingthrough.com. Remember, it's better to travel hopefully than to arrive.